I think the pharma industry should wonder how to allocate their human capital. Where do they need to invest their human capital? Is it in running trials? Is it into promoting blockbusters? Is it in manufacturing? Coming from pharma, I would probably argue that big pharma need to think about where is the competitive advantage, and this is where they need to invest in human capital. Each pharma and biotech organization should wonder where this human capital should lie.
Pierre-Antoine, welcome. First of all, thank you for coming to our event. It's been a pleasure to have you, and I've already had some very good feedback from the session you were on. So first and foremost, thank you for that. I'd like to start with asking one basic question, which is, for those that don't know Pierre-Antoine, can you please explain who you are and also how you got here?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Pierre-Antoine, also known as PA, because it's actually quite hard to pronounce. Before telling you about my professional life, I'm a happy father of 3 daughters. This is what matters the most. And on the side business, I work at IQVIA, where I lead actually different businesses. On the one hand, I care about selling and delivering clinical studies for biotechs, so all biotechs based in EMEA. That's part of my job. The second team I have is we are selling all the IQVIA services, so reward services, commercial services to big pharma. So for big pharma, I'm personally not in charge of clinical trials, and for biotechs, I'm in charge only of clinical trials, which gives me like a very good understanding of what IQVIA can offer to biopharma companies. It's been a long journey. I've been working for like about 25 years. I don't have like a linear career path. Funny enough, I started in oil and gas. And then I moved at some point by chance in consulting. And when I was in consulting, I was by chance tapped on a pharma project. And I literally fell in love. And I was like, okay, this is what I want to do for the next decades. That was back in 2011. So you also can question what brought me here. So my good friend called me, and he asked me about China. He knows that I've been interested and passionate about China for probably like more than 15 years. And then when I was proposed to join a panel to talk about China and how much China is probably disrupting our industry, I was all in. What I also like is it's not just like a usual event. I feel like what you are trying to achieve with The End is probably approaching clinical trials from a different angle. And I thought say that's the right place to be to learn about innovation and talk about innovation in clinical trials. My good friend, I didn't mention him, it's William Avery.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the compliment. I'll take it as a compliment too. Obviously, you know, we'll discuss eventually about some of these things, like the China topic and a few others, but I like to believe that the man you are today with 3 doctors as a first, and then obviously as a great career for the past 25 years-ish, that if I recall the number. Where did it start? So if you look back into your childhood, usually I like to believe that if you look at it, there's a few points, a few cornerstones, a few milestones that you achieved that suddenly it's like, wow, this changed my life to who I am today. If you look back, what are some of those that shaped up to who you are?
Yeah, there are plenty of milestones or moments where I actually pivoted. What has always driven me is people. I think I made wrong choices in my career because I followed the wrong people or I followed my intuition, but I have no regrets. So a couple of like pivotal moments. The first one is like right after so I'm an engineer by training. And when I graduated back in 2003, that was, I mean, quite a difficult time. Probably you remember the end of the internet bubble. So the employment in Europe was kind of like quite tough. So I choose to go to consulting. That was not really a choice. That was the first job I was offered. So not really a choice. Then after a couple of years, I was chased by a client, and the reason why I decided to join this client was just because of the manager. The guy came to me saying, "Okay, this is my company. This is what we're doing. We are a P-back company. We have no clue what we're going to do in the future, but I want people like you because I know what you can bring to the company." And I think it was very impulsive. I just decided to go because I had a good gut feeling about this person. So I just joined the company. I stayed a couple of years there. It was a P-back company. So we raised for first LBO, second LBO, third LBO, and then at some point the company was acquired by a corporate. End of the story. And then I was like, okay, what do I want to do next? And I had no clue. And I decided to go back to consulting, so M&A consulting. That was not really a choice, that was a non-choice. And the second pivotal moment in my career was at some point, as I told you, I was just staffed. You know how consulting works. I mean, you can be on like any type of industry and sector. So at some point I was on I'll always remember this project. I was staffed on a project. It was like a due diligence for a new molecular entity, phase 1, super complex, very complex science in multiple autoimmune disorders. I had no clue about what it was. I had no clue about the pathophysiology of those diseases, no clue about pharma, no clue about science. But I literally fell in love. I remember like reading scientific publications until like 3 a.m. in the morning. And my wife, she was like, "Okay, what the hell are you doing? Why are you working so hard?" And I told her, "I'm not working, I'm learning." And this is why I decided to pivot to the pharma industry. And still now, and then I like a couple of like different jobs. So in this company called Aika Consulting, and then I moved to Sanofi, and then I moved to IQVIA. But I think the real pivotal moment was this first project where I just realized that reading scientific publication at 3 a.m. in the morning was not literally what I call working, it was learning. And what drives me today is still the same, learning.
It's actually interesting, by the way, because I think everyone goes through this path of, getting out of school in whichever university, whatever you want to call it, and thinking, this is it, yeah, I've learned it all, now I'm going to work. And then eventually you realize that it's actually learned well to have a life, right? And it's been to a very controversial topic today of how AI is also impacting education. You have 3 daughters, you said earlier. I don't know the age, but I assume that certainly either already in school or about to get to school, in either case.
In school.
In school. How do you see the way that we are now building these tools with AI suddenly at reach to a kid, at any point in time, any question, unfiltered? And how is that going to impact the way we are educating and we are learning? Because as I see so much passion on the learning side from you, I'm sure you'll learn the good old way of taking a bunch of materials, reading them, eventually making up your own mind about that. And I don't think that's the way we will perhaps see that in the future in terms of education. So what's your opinion on this, and have you thought about it? Because some people haven't.
Yeah, a lot. When you have kids, you have to think about it. Thing is, when we started in school and then at the university, we had to learn because we thought that learning would help us get a job. And getting a job was about how much we knew. I think in today's words, and probably in the future, knowledge will almost be a commodity. Any information you want, I mean, you can get access to it on ChatGPT. Anything you need to learn, ChatGPT will give it to you. I think what I tell to my daughter is don't just learn because it has some value and you can monetize your knowledge. You have to learn because you want to be better persons. Because what you learn and what you digest by yourself, with the help of AI, artificial intelligence, can help you learn and digest knowledge quicker. But if you want to be a better person in the future, you have to digest all this, you have to learn. And they always tell me, yes, but I can get access to all this knowledge on ChatGPT. So yes, you can. But when you're having like one-to-one discussion, there's no iPhone, there's no iPad. It's all about who you are and what you know. So if learning and knowledge is a commodity, where is the value? I do believe that there is one thing that artificial intelligence will not replace. It's trust. And if you think about the value chain, there is the knowledge, the data, the analysis, the decision, and the action. I think so far, artificial intelligence gives you access to unlimited amount of information. Gen AI, artificial intelligence, can make the analysis on your behalf. They are better, quicker. They can even generate things. Soon they will be able to take decisions. And at some point, robotic AI will be able to take actions. The one thing that it would start going to do in the short term, it's trust. And what I'm also trying to teach to my daughters is, how can you build trust with other human beings? And what type of knowledge, but also communication style do you need to build to build this level of trust?
Interesting. And by the way, I fully agree that the trust is one piece. I think the human connection is another piece, which perhaps goes beyond trust in a certain extent, because I think there's a reason why we also like some people, don't like other people, right? So I think there's these sizes things, which perhaps you don't get as much with AI, although probably you could have a favorite and a less favorite AI. It's not as much interrelated into your connection with that AI, right? I think even if you like an AI more, tomorrow you'll try another one. But if I really like this friend, fine, I probably want just to swap it, kind of mind, right? And that connection definitely will stay. Maybe moving more into our world of clinical trials. And since you've been in this space for a little while, so from Sanofi to then IQVIA, and what have you seen since you started working in clinical trials that you consider evolution or a change for the better?
I've seen an acceleration in specific tasks. We're not at a level where we can like fully run a clinical trial with agents. But some specific tasks have been improved through data science, artificial intelligence, and data. Let me give a couple of examples. Patient recruitment, identifying patients with rare diseases to enroll patients quicker on trials. I mean, that has accelerated dramatically with artificial intelligence. I mean, using existing like claims data, registry, electronic clinical records to identify and help the sites identify patients that are potentially eligible to a clinical study. This, we're doing it much better. Second thing, or even before that, I mean, protocol design, synopsis design, I mean, all this can be generated through large language modeling, and we can save a lot of time. Trials, if you go downstream, trials have always been about statistics and data science. I mean, biostat is by definition data science. I think we have tools now to accelerate from database log into the final data, all the biostat analysis. There's one element people often ask me, hey, PA, do you believe that we can like fully replace CROs by AI? When you run trials, like real trials, you just realize that there are like plenty of things that are about the trust, the relationships, or also like the logistics. Let me give a concrete example. You want to send a sample as part of your trial. You have to send a sample to like Turkey, Ukraine, Georgia, or Venezuela or Brazil, because you have sites there. You need to manage the custom clearance, and then it may happen that the samples will be blocked at the customs. I mean, this is all about like talking to the customs, making sure you get the custom clearance. I mean, those kind of like very practical logistics issue cannot yet be replaced by AI. Same thing with contractualization with sites. If you think about the past, I mean, clinical trials are actually quite simple. It's about like having a synopsis and then a protocol, then opening sites, then finding the patients, then just like running the trial as per the protocol, locking the data and doing the biostats. But if I take the step like contractualization with the sites, it's about discussion, negotiation on the grants. It's this at the moment cannot yet be replaced 100% with AI. AI can help you identify the best sites, provided that you have sufficient data to identify those sites. But negotiation with the sites, I mean, there's an element of human relationship. So it has your question in a nutshell. Some tasks have been improved. I'm talking about clinical studies and not preclinical. Some tasks, individual tasks, have been improved. Some others are still being run the way we did it like 20 years ago.
I like to give my opinion, and I cannot hold myself from giving my opinion, even though it's a podcast more about you. I do agree a lot on the logistical side, and then there's definitely stuff there that still today, due to the nature of our customs and all that, it's really a human-led process. I will actually disagree with you on the contracts piece and actually challenge you to go, if you're here tomorrow, to go to a session that we are doing on a launch of a product that we have, actually automating full contractualization process for sites. So definitely challenge you on that one. And
I would love to hear about it.
I
I would love to hear about it.
I will not go into too much detail now, but happy to obviously explain it further afterwards, so how we built that and how it's run. But more importantly, I think you alluded to some things, and I think I don't want to put you at that spot, also considering your employer, but while there are indeed some tasks that perhaps are human-led, like the customs or the supply chain, to what extent can those not be done then by sponsors rather than by CROs, right? And to what extent is there a need, perhaps at the point where the sponsors have all those tools? And I'm saying this because we had, for example, Gonzalo from Alexion today saying that they are moving to a more and more in-house approach rather than CRO outsourced approach. So I think this is a trend, and perhaps you would disagree. Obviously a number of trials keeps going up this year, so that thank God for that. But for some reason, there is a trend that we are starting to see about sponsors wanting to be more involved, but also bringing more stuff in-house. Perhaps rephrasing this question, how do you think that will evolve the relationship between the CRO and the sponsor? Because obviously, I think there is always a space in the market, but the relationship will naturally change.
Absolutely. And I'd say first it depends on the sponsors. If the sponsor is a biotech of 10 people, and it's a lot of the market. A lot of the market are like small biotechs that have been able to raise 10, 20, 50, 100 million, but they're very scarce in resources. And in that case, when they outsource to CROs, I mean, we do everything end to end. We call it like FSM model. And with mid-size and big pharma, I mean, you have trends. At some point, it was like really about outsourcing everything. Now it seems that they are insourcing or internalizing a little bit more resources. I think those are, I mean, cycles. And probably at the moment, it's slightly moving for some pharma back into internalizing some capabilities. It may change in the future the other way around. I mean, you need to think about what has created this CRO industry. Probably at the beginning, it was to manage the peaks of activity. So basically, the big pharma sponsors were kind of like outsourcing some tasks to CROs just to manage the peak of activities. And at some points, they started to realize that, okay, CRO are not bad at doing trials. So they were outsourcing more. And ultimately, they were just realizing that not only CRO were not bad in terms of efficiency, but they were also more cost efficient. And they were outsourcing more and more. I think the question you're raising is a great question. I think the pharma industry should wonder how to allocate their human capital. Where do they need to invest their human capital? Is it in running trials? Is it into promoting blockbusters? Is it in manufacturing? Coming from pharma, I would probably argue that big pharma need to think about where is the competitive advantage, and this is where they need to invest in human capital. Is it in reps, in MSLs, in CRAs, in finance, or in manufacturing? I think each pharma and biotech organization should wonder where this human capital should lie.
And by the way, it's a great point to make to pharma and biotech companies, especially because if you go back to the point I was trying to say on how the relationship between the CRO and the pharma will work. I'm sure you've seen it. I've personally seen it as well. How some of these pharma and biotech companies hand over the study, and it's it. They think that their responsibility and ownership finishes there because you're a FSMR or whichever other version of in-house outsourcing of clinical trials you're running. And it's not like that, right? The sponsor needs to be involved. The sponsor needs to take ownership, certainly. And eventually, many times, they also are the ones giving approval. And if they're not involved, it's really hard for them to give approval with all the knowledge in their hands in certain things. So I think on the workforce topic, I'll definitely leave a suggestion that they should probably focus on helping the CROs achieving great results rather than just passing the hot potato to the CRO and say, here, take care of it. And then obviously when it doesn't go well, which is the vast majority of the times, then blaming the CRO for the results rather than understanding that perhaps if they look inwards, they'll find a lot more of the answers of their own problems. But that said, and it's from personal experience stories, so I could go on all day long telling you about these type of sponsors we've had and how that was their answer to a lot of the problems. But in clinical trials, and actually we're managing to discuss this offline earlier, um, there's been a big topic about diversity in clinical trials. Everyone talks about it. We talked this for many, many years. Personally, I have an opinion that actually diversity goes beyond phenotypes, but also goes into social economic statuses and how if I am perhaps from a higher level social economic status, my dieting, my way of living is completely different. My stress levels are very different. Even if you look back in Maslow's pyramid, my foundations are very different. And perhaps if I am from a lower income status, which also leads to different stress levels, different habits. What have you seen to be done in, I guess, the diversity space? And where do you see that evolving into, considering that at the end of the day, the trial should mimic a real life patient population?
I'm all in on diversity in clinical trials, even before my IQVIA time. Um, I think you said it right. It's much more than phenotype. It's a phenotype, it's genetic, but it's also the environment, it's comorbidities. And we need to make sure that we mimic the best the diversity of patient in the real life in clinical trials. With the limitation that we have, obviously we cannot have like 1 million patients in clinical trials. But we should, as an industry, do our best to mimic the diversity of the patient in the real life. I think we're still far away from what we should do, but I want to be positive, and I'm observing a couple of good signals. Um, Let me give 2 examples. Chinese population in global trials. At some points, a kind of like a decade ago, most trials were run out of the US and Europe. And if you wanted to get the approval in China, you had to run like a Chinese trial in China for China. I think with time, because of the changes in the NMPA regulation, you can now, for some study, have the NMPA approval based on global trials, provided that you have sufficient number of Chinese patients in global trials. So I think the regulators, whether it's the NMPA or the FDA, have enforced policies that helps get more diversity in trials. We're also observing this with African population in trials. We're seeing like more and more population with African sites. Obviously, IQVIA is by far the biggest CRO in Africa, and this is something like really music to our ears. This is something we're trying to influence also for our sponsors to make sure we have sufficient number of sites and patients in Africa, given the different phenotypes. And it's not just about like having Afro Americans in trials. It's also about having African patients in their different environments than Afro Americans. As I think we're going in the right direction, but probably not at the pace that I would personally like. I would love that that policies, so FDA, EMA, and NMPA policies are becoming more stringent to make sure that we have more diversity.
Where do you see that policy and I guess regulations helping? Because obviously today they aren't, right? So what do they need to do? And is that just on a KPI metric function, or is there other things that they can do to help ensuring that that's happening?
I probably 8 KPI. To start with, that's probably the level the level 1. So make sure you have different populations, but also more importantly is helping the sponsors make sure that including patients from different places, different subgroups, different ethnicities, different location with different comorbidities will also be valuable for the sponsors. Not sure what this policy would look like, but it's always like the stick versus the carrots. I think the regulators can play with the stick, like forcing the sponsor to include patients from different geographies or different subgroups, but also the carrots. It has to pay off for the sponsors. It might be something also to think about with the inclusion and exclusion criteria. We tend to exclude a lot of patients because there's a risk that those patients will respond less to the drug, and sometimes this could be at the expense of the diversity in trials. Let me give one example. It happens often that for typical liver diseases, we exclude HIV patients because of the potential interactions. I think that's a topic close to my heart that I would love the pharma industry to think about how we can include systematically some HIV positive patients in all the trials, even though we know, unless there is obviously a significant toxicity issue, but even though we know that they may not respond the exact same way.
It's a very good point, I think, because there's a ton of comorbidities or any other mutual commonality diseases that could interact, and unfortunately, we have to.
Absolutely. And excluding those patients from the trials and ultimately excluding those patients from the label is probably not the best way to provide the best therapies to patients who need it.
It's definitely not the way forward, I would say. And on the topic of the way forward, to finalize with one question, and it's a personal view that I'm asking, not necessarily a IQVIA stance, please. Where do you see the evolution for the next 5 years in clinical trials to be the greatest? And where would you position the clinical trial sphere in 5 years' time?
I think it's all about being quicker. Think about, drugs. A potential NPV for a new molecular entity. Pricing is under pressure in the US. Net prices are under pressure in the US. Loss of exclusivity will come quicker in the US because the IRA is almost as you would have like a loss of exclusivity after 12 years in the US. Same in China. So there's a lot of pressure on the NPV, which means that you need to reduce the clinical development costs, and you need to be much more quicker. It's still not acceptable that it takes 10 to 15 years to develop a drug from preclinical studies to regulatory approval. This is where we as an industry, we need to improve. I think this will probably be supported by two factors. The first one is policies. One may argue, or one may wonder, if head-to-head pivotal studies versus the standard of care to have an incremental overall survival is still the golden Bible, or if we should think about generating sufficient evidence of a clinical benefit versus the standard of care in a different way. So different endpoints and different trial design specifically for pivotal study. So policies have to help there. And I think from what I've seen on typically critical diseases and rare disease at the FDA, I think FDA is going slowly in that direction. The second one is technology. Technology to save time at each step of the process. Often as a CRO, I'm very frustrated because we have a lot of pressure to increase the enrollment rates. But if you think about this 10 to 15 years from preclinical studies to regulatory approval, probably 1/3 of it is what I call the white spaces. White spaces is this timeline between phase 1 data and the phase 2 startup. where you will lose 12 months to 18 months to think about the phase 2 study design, the right indication, the endpoint, the synopsis, the protocol. And if you are a biotech, you will have to raise funds. So I think we can win a lot of time on those white spaces, and probably technology can help. But within each phase of a clinical trial, we can also save a lot of time on patient recruitment, patient identification, site identification, contractualization with the sites. I think this is where we can save a lot of time.
Pierre-Antoine, it was a pleasure. Thank you for
Likewise. Thank you.